Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Before we begin today's session of the comprehensive news analysis, I really hope that all of you are following the Target Prelims 2022 crash course that had started on our YouTube channel on the 30th of April. The next class, that is tomorrow on the 4th of May, will be of international relations at 7:30 p.m. So do join in for that and make sure that your preparation gets the final touches that it needs. Now let's begin today's analysis with the first article that talks about the controversial visit of American Member of Parliament, that is Miss Ilhan Omar, to Pakistan and to Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Now Ilhan Omar is one of the rising stars of the Democrat Party in the US, the same party to which President Joe Biden belongs. Now, recently, she made a 4-day trip to Pakistan, and not just Pakistan, she in fact visited Pakistan occupied Kashmir, which obviously did not go well with India. India condemned her visit, and that is why this topic is in the news now. The US government, led by Joe Biden, was very careful in handling the matter, and they distanced themselves, saying that this was a personal visit and the US government does not have anything to do with that. Now, in very simple terms, since India regards that the POK or Pakistan occupied Kashmir is still officially India's territory, anyone going there, especially from a friendly nation, should actually ask India or should not visit at all. Or if they are visiting, they should ask India, or at least India's permission should be taken before going into that area. But that was not the case here. Now, what you have to understand here is that the members of parliament in the US operate in a very different manner as compared to India. In the sense that unlike India, the US members of Congress is what their parliament is called, take a keen interest in how the foreign policy of their country is formed. Unlike India, in which the foreign policy and most of the policy decisions are taken by the cabinet, in the US that is not really the case. In fact, the US House, that is the lower house, House of Representatives, and the upper house, the Senate, have multiple committees on a lot of subjects which may even be outside America. For example, there is a subcommittee on Asia in the Senate which held its meeting last month specifically towards India, and Jammu and Kashmir also was discussed. So the US Congress and the US members of the Congress have this habit of taking a keen and deep interest in the foreign affairs around the world, which does not go well with many countries, as was the case this time with India. Now we must remember that in US, India fortunately enjoys the support of both the parties when it comes to the US Congress. So most of the India related resolutions that are passed in the US Congress are in support of India, with an exception of very few of them. Now if you talk about Ilhan Omar specifically, it's interesting to know her background. So she is actually a migrant to US. She came from Somalia, where her parents went to the US to escape all the violence that was happening in Somalia. Ever since she had joined the US politics, she has been very vocal about where the foreign policy of the US president is lacking. She especially speaks about the foreign policy of the US with respect to Islamic countries and the nations which have a significant Islamic population. And that is why her visit to Pakistan in some ways should not really come as a surprise. She has been very vocal about issues on education, environmental justice, immigration, healthcare, etc., especially those that are with respect to the migrants in the US, because she herself is a migrant to the US. In fact, last December, she sponsored a bill in the US Congress to combat international Islamophobia. That is the negative reaction that people have with respect to Islam throughout the world. That is what she wanted to negate, and she wanted the US government to play a major role in that. Now, while you can argue all this while that okay, this was a personal visit, this does not really mean that the US government has anything to do with the POK, but the fact remains that she belongs to the same party that has the president of the US right now. Although the Biden administration was very clear in saying that the visit was unofficial and personal and we did not sponsor it, but it does raise certain questions. And the first obvious question is, can something like this happen in India? Now the obvious answer is no, it cannot, because we have different types of political systems. Now do understand the fact that India follows the anti-defection law, which means that the members of parliament belonging to the ruling party are bound by the whip of their party. That is, if the higher leadership of the political party tells the members of parliament to take a certain step, to vote in a certain manner, to not vote in a certain manner, or to make certain statements, in all the cases they have to abide by that. They cannot vote from their own free will. Otherwise, it would lead to their disqualification. The same is not the case in US. In US, multiple members of Congress, even though they may belong to the same party, might differ on a certain bill. That is why even if a party is in majority and they introduce a bill, it is not always certain that the bill will pass. That is why in the US, the specific members of parliament have a lot more freedom as compared to what happens in case of India. So they may raise issues even against their own government, which Ilhan Omar has done in the past. She has complained about how Biden administration has been running, and she has raised multiple issues which would not really lead to her going away from the party. Now, as I said earlier, she did raise questions against her own government. For example, you can see here, she tweeted, "Why has Biden administration been so reluctant to criticize Modi government on the human rights record?" So number one, this is not the first time she has been critical of India or she has taken up issue which India does not appreciate. Secondly, she is one of those leaders that has raised voice against their own government and against their own party. So this should not come as a surprise to anyone, especially those who are aware of her politics. Also, we must underline that this does not change anything between the two countries at the highest level, since the US was very clear and quick to clarify about her visit. The next article that we have is about the GST. Now, just like the past few months, this month also, when the GST numbers came out, they have reached a record high. In fact, since the beginning of the GST regime, the collection that we did in April of 2022 is the highest ever collected in 1 month. That is 1.67 lakh crore, which is much higher than the last highest number that was in March, which was 1.42 lakh crore rupees. Now, if you look at it for the first time, you would obviously appreciate it. You would think that yes, the government is getting a lot more money, so it would be happier times for the people in the times to come. But if you just remove certain layers, you would understand that there is a cause of concern here. The first biggest cause of concern is that why is it that the tax has increased so much? The very simple reason can be inflation. Everything is so much costlier now, so obviously you are paying more tax on everything. For example, let's say the burger that you are eating right now earlier used to cost rupees 50 and you had to pay, let's say, a 5% GST on that. So that would just mean rupees 2.5. But now if the same burger is costing you rupees 70, the 5% tax would be now 3.5 rupees. So because the prices of almost every commodity have increased, it was very obvious that the GST collection would obviously increase. So first, it might not be a great sign for the economy that you are taking more money out of the pockets of the people and giving it to the government. Secondly, if you actually see the track record of GST, you would see that every year it is the collection of the month of April only that is extremely high. That means that we should not expect that the same pattern would continue throughout this year. That is also because a lot of merchants file their returns and the government also makes sure that people file their return on time, and that is why April usually has a higher tax collection as compared to the other months, and I'll show you with certain examples in just a bit. However, on one front where this is actually good news is with respect to the states. The state governments had been arguing that the GST compensation that should be given to them by the center government has been delayed for many months now. The center government, on the other hand, says that we have inadequate balance in our compensation cess fund. So thankfully now that they are getting more money, it is expected that they would give more money to the states without delaying it and without forcing the state governments to stop their particular schemes which they are running for the welfare of the people. While the center government has announced that this high GST collection is an indication of economic recovery after corona and we are again entering a time where economic growth will be very high, but as per the experts, as I said earlier, inflation has a big role to play, and that is why high GST collection might not always be a positive sign for the government to feel happy about. Now, these are some of the highlights with respect to the GST collection that we had in the month of April 2022. It is the first time ever that the GST collection in a month has crossed 1.5 lakh crore rupees. Yes, at some level it might reflect enhanced business activity, but it also points towards higher prices on almost every commodity throughout the country right now. As I said earlier, Month of April usually sees a higher tax collection as compared to the other months. You can see what happened in the last year. So last year, April GST collection was about 1,39,000 crore, which was more than most of the months. It was only in the month of Jan and in the month of March that the GST collection was higher than that number. So this year also we can expect the same kind of a pattern to follow. This high GST collection might not be followed with the same collection every single month, but it does bring in a good sign that at least the government is having more money in their hands. Maybe it would result in bringing down the fuel prices, which remains to be seen in the future. The Finance Ministry released the state-wise data of the GST collection growth. So state by state, how much GST has increased or how much GST collection increased has been shown in this data. As you can see, the highest jump of all the states was actually seen in the state of Arunachal Pradesh, where the GST collection jumped from 103 crore to 196 crore. Now, because the base number is not that high, that is why you see such a high jump of 90% in case of Arunachal Pradesh. Otherwise, in terms of absolute numbers, if you see the states where GST collection has improved as compared to the last year, you can see towards UP, which has seen a good jump of about 1200 crore rupees. Same with Delhi, a jump of over 800 crore rupees. Same is the case with Rajasthan, which has shown a positive jump. And also with states such as Tamil Nadu, Telangana, and Andhra Pradesh doing pretty well apart from Karnataka. However, the one state where the biggest jump in the GST collection in the overall figures is seen is the state of Maharashtra, where you can see that the GST collection has jumped by more than 5,000 crore rupees as compared to the last year's April numbers. Now, as I said earlier, there are different interpretations that are coming out to justify the high GST collection, while the Finance Ministry is saying that it is because of our data analytics, artificial intelligence, strict enforcement of the law that the numbers have increased. But it would be hard to ignore the fact that the inflation is also extremely high, with all the numbers, that is the CPI, WPI going very, very high, which might have resulted in the high GST collection. Also, because a lot more returns were filed in the month of April, that is why the numbers seem to be pretty inflated as compared to the last year. The next article that we have is about the EV, that is electric vehicles, mainly the two-wheelers that are seeing a lot of untoward incidents in India. We have seen how multiple EVs or electric vehicles, electric scooters are catching fire across the country in different parts, which has become a cause of concern for the industry and for the government. So much so that the government, led by Nitin Gadkari, have ordered an inquiry into why is it that these kind of incidents are taking place, because these are dangerous incidents. Now, if you actually see the EVs, especially the two-wheeler version, have made a big mark in India in the past few years. More than 11 lakh electric or battery-operated vehicles are registered in India right now, which is a significant increase as compared to the last few years, especially because the cost of the lithium-ion batteries have fallen significantly. These batteries are the main components of any EV and they make up for most of the cost. That is why a cutting down of the cost of these batteries has resulted in the electric two-wheeler especially becoming much more affordable as compared to the earlier. However, the root of the problem as to why is it that the two-wheelers are catching fire may also be in these batteries only. See, the lithium-ion batteries, as you call them, are the core of the EV technology, and over time they have become much more affordable with a lot of different methods coming in to make and preserve these batteries. And that is where the problem lies. These are the batteries which require a much sophisticated handling, and expert guidance has to be provided at every single step of making such batteries without any compromise. The battery fires mainly occur when there is a rise in temperature, and in the presence of oxygen and fuel they catch fire very, very easily. In the long run, there have to be some other modifications to be made to the lithium ion batteries. For example, we have to introduce solid state electrolytes which would be much lesser susceptible to such incidents. We also have to introduce special safety switches which can reduce these incidents of fire many times, but for that we have to wait until the time that these technologies are available to us in the market. We have to make sure that the existing players in the market who are making these kind of products are adhering to the best possible safety standards which are available, which is not the case right now. Now, just to give you a brief idea, because this is important from the point of view of science and tech of GS3, Every lithium ion battery mainly has three components. That is the anode, negatively charged, which is usually graphite, cathode, which is positively charged, which can be nickel, cobalt, or manganese based oxide, and then there's the electrolyte in between, which ensures that there is flow of ions or flow of charge. This electrolyte is mainly lithium in an inorganic solvent. Now, any battery is multiple cells basically combined together. These cells are separated by a thin separator. Now, these separators are very thin, about 15 microns in thickness, and this is where the problem starts. If they are not used properly, or if they don't do their job properly, that is when there is anode and cathode that have a short circuit, which leads to a fire being caused in the entire battery. Ideally, there should be thermal switches that turn off if the battery overheats, which is not really found in most of these two-wheelers that are catching this fire. And the presence of these three, heat, oxygen and fuel, ensure that the fire becomes out of control very soon, which can be very dangerous, especially if the person is riding the vehicle when the fire starts. This, if you see, is the most simplified version of the cell. So there is a cathode, positively charged, anode, and then there are ions in between. It is the flow of ions only from positive to the negative side that results into forming of energy, which leads to the vehicle moving forward. One other issue that might come up in the future, which thankfully has not happened in India right now, is that when the EV vehicles actually crash into each other, or let's say there is an electric vehicle which crashes with some other vehicle, that can also result into explosion risk. Because again, the most dangerous thing for an EV vehicle would be a sudden rise in temperature. Any crash will result in overheating, which would lead to increase in probability of such an explosion happening. And that is why a lot more safety precautions have to be taken, especially for two-wheelers, which in order to be made affordable do not really give all these safety features. So you have to choose at the end of the day, are you going for safety or are you going towards the most affordable vehicle ever? For example, you had the Tata Nano, which was supposed to be the most affordable vehicle ever, but it also had the worst possible safety ratings. So which is the one where you have to compromise? Especially in the two-wheeler section in India, the EVs that are running right now are running at a cutthroat competition where every company is trying to make the cheapest vehicle possible, which is not really in the interest of the end consumer. The next article that we have talks about quasi-federalism. It's a very interesting article that gives you a lot of historical insights about the discussions that took place in our Constituent Assembly. You all are good students of Indian polity, and I'm sure all of you would have heard about how India is a quasi-federal country. That is, we are a federal country, but not in a true sense. Our federalism is very different from that of other nations such as the US, in the sense that in US and other federal nations, the center government and the state governments have divided their powers either equally or in such a way that the powers are decentralized and the lower unit, that is the states, would have more powers. In India, on the other hand, our federalism is more on the model of the Canadian system. That is, the center government has much more authority over the states. That is why we are in a concept of quasi-federalism. The author here says that India should not really be called a federal country anymore. The reason is that the definition of federalism itself means that the center and the states should be independent of each other. They should not depend on one another. On the other hand, how Indian system works is that the state governments are always dependent on the union governments for most of the matters, and it has increased even more ever since we have the GST. Ever since the GST has been introduced, the state governments have always been crying that number one, they don't get enough money. Second, even if they do get that money first goes to the central government and then they take their own sweet time to transfer the money to us. Third, the compensation is not being provided. Whatever losses that we have faced because of the implementation of GST, we are not getting money for that also. So all in all, the state governments in India for many reasons are dependent on the central government only. Let me give you some more examples. The Indian Parliament has the power to change the name of the state, to change the boundary of the state, to make a new state even if the state says no, that we are not in agreement of this. Telangana is a very prime example. When the state of Telangana was formed, the Legislative Assembly of Andhra Pradesh was asked their view. they were against the formation of Telangana, but still the state of Telangana came into being, because this is what the constitution is. This is the power that is given to the union, that is the parliament, that they can make changes in the state even without the state's consent. And that has also got to do because India's history is of a country that, and this is also because India's history is more of a country which is holding together and not coming together. Now let me clarify the difference between the two. See, if you look at the history of US and you look at the history of India, you would see that there are some very important differences. USA is an example of a country coming together. So USA was nothing but a group of states which the British used to rule. When the British left, the 13 states of US, they decided to come together and form a nation called the United States of America. So USA was never a natural country. It was just different states fighting together and deciding to come together. That is why the states decided to keep most of the power with themselves and give very little power to the center. India, on the other hand, is a different argument. India has always been a single country altogether. So in India, it is more about the states holding together, not coming together. We have always been a country and we have divided the states later on. Whichever unit comes first. In case of America, the states came first. In case of India, the union came first. Whichever unit comes first would obviously have more powers. Just imagine in your house, if you have an elder sibling, if you have an elder brother, elder sister, what are the chances that they will have the TV remote and not you if you are the younger one? So the unit that comes first will obviously dominate, and that is how India and America's federalism are different from each other. However, the fact that India will be a federal country always has been reiterated by the Supreme Court as well. In the very famous S.R. Bommai case, the Supreme Court said that federalism is a part of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution and thus it can never be amended. Not just this, the Supreme Court again in 2006 said that India's federalism talks about a strong center government. So you cannot say that because India is a federal country, more powers are to be given to the states, because our federal structure cannot be compared to the one that has followed in other nations such as the US. Now the article says that if you look at the debates in the Constituent Assembly and the kind of politics that was happening at that time, there are multiple reasons why this kind of a federal structure was adopted. The first reason was a partition. So as per the cabinet mission plan, which did not really talk about partition, the plan had said that Muslim League's representatives will also be a part of the Constituent Assembly and they would also be a part of the union government. That is why Nehru's earlier idea was that the states should be given more power, because in the center government level, the Muslim League would also be representative. However, when partition happened, this version of the Congress was revised and they went on in the favor of having a strong union government, thinking that now they would be able to run the country better and also ensure the unity of the country, because India was going through a very tough time at that point of time. The second reason, as per the author, maybe was about this hierarchical and the discriminatory society that we had. So there are still states in India where certain states have a lot more money, a lot more development as compared to some other states. The responsibility of evening those out and ensuring that we are distributing the profits and we are distributing the fruits of development throughout the country is with the central government only. And they can only do that when they have the power over the state. The third reason, as per the article, maybe is to build a welfare state, to ensure that the government of India first thinks about those people who require the government support and then thinks about other. Maybe the state government would not be able to do that, and that is why the center government should be given more power. And the final reason, as per the author, is to ensure that the inequality of different regions can be curtailed. Now, this is not to say that these are the reasons given in the constitution. These are just the reasons as per the author. The author of this article believes that maybe these are the reasons why India opted for this version of federalism. So it's not to say that this is the official version of the government of India. However, this term quasi-federal is something that we keep on using in Indian polity. We read it in the books also. Now, there are some unique features of India's federalism. India follows a single constitution. As compared to US, where each state has its own constitution, India follows one single constitution at the union level. So we are a federal country, but without the freedom to the states to have their own constitution. Similarly, we have provisions for division of power. The seventh schedule has three specific lists: union, state, and concurrent. However, it is easy to conclude that the union list is the most powerful, and even in case of the concurrent list, it is the union that has the most power. Constitution also is not very strictly rigid. That is, the Constitution of India can be changed even without the consent of the states in most of the matters. It is only when India's federal features are being altered, it is only then that the state government's consent is also required, and that too only half of the state legislatures. We also have unified judiciary. Unlike the US, which has state courts which are different and union courts which are different, India has the same type of courts. So for a case against the central government also, you can go to the High Court. The High Court can also strike down laws made by the union government, and the Supreme Court can also do the same with respect to the states. So we don't have a state-wise division of judiciary as such in India. I told this to you earlier also, how the Supreme Court had said that federalism is a part of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. Similarly, there was one more case of 1969 called the Satpal versus the state of Punjab and others case, in which the Supreme Court had said that the Constitution of India is more quasi-federal than federal or unitary. So you can quote this case also, where the Supreme Court itself said that India's constitution is quasi-federal and not completely federal. The next article takes us back to the language issue, an issue which has been in the newspaper every alternate day now over the past couple of months. Now again, this is not telling us anything new as such, because nothing new has happened in the debate of whether or not Hindi should be used across the country or should the regional languages be given their due. Now the reason why this article is being written is it is giving us a historical perspective of what exactly happened in 1965. Now why is 1965 so relevant? That is because the Constitution of India came into force in 1950. As per the Constitution of India, Hindi was to be the official language and English would also be the official language only for 15 years, 1-5. So 1965 was the year that the term of English was to come to an end, and that is when the South Indian states, especially the Tamil Nadu state, was very unhappy because they thought that now it would result in English going away and Hindi being imposed. That is what led to this agitation in which over 60 people lost their lives. And that is why it is very relevant to understand this. Whenever we talk about language, and many people have this view that why are we making language such a big issue, why are we thinking so loudly about it, we have to understand the history of India. People have lost their lives for this issue of language. It is not a small issue. So this write-up tells us that Article 343 of the Constitution says that the official language of the Union shall be Hindi in Devanagari script. Although there were long debates in the Constituent Assembly about this, as to what should be the official language, even if it is Hindi, what kind of numerals should be used, because right now we use the Roman numerals. For example, in the official papers, we don't write 1 like this. We write 1 like this. So this is the Roman officials. So there was a debate about that also, which kind of numerals have to be used. And even the script, should it be Devanagari script or should it be some other script? However, in the end, the compromise was that Hindi will be the official language along with English for a period of 15 years, after which the English language would go away. In fact, there were some people in the assembly that had said that Sanskrit should be made the official language and not Hindi, because Sanskrit is the mother of most of the Indian languages that we have. But that was not accepted because we had very few Sanskrit speakers or people who understood Sanskrit in the country. Now the government of India was well aware that in 1965, when the 15-year period comes to an end, the people would be very anxious and they would not want Hindi to be imposed over them. That is why the government was very careful, and in 1963 itself, they had passed the Official Languages Act, which said that the use of English shall continue for the official purpose. So the good part was that the government did not wait for the 15-year period to end, because they knew that something wrong might happen, and that is why they were very proactive in doing this. However, it still did not stop the people from agitating, and the reason was simple. Jawaharlal Nehru, that is India's first Prime Minister, in 1959, in a speech, had assured that English will remain in the official use and as a language of communication between the center and the states, so you don't worry about that. He was talking to the non-Hindi speaking states that you don't have to be bothered, English is not going anywhere. But the problem was that when the law was passed, that is the Official Languages Act of 1963, it said that the use of English will continue for official use. That was fine. But it did not specifically say that English will still be used for center and state communication as well. This is what the states had a problem with. And that was a spark that led to the entire agitation. So much so, when the protests broke out, over 60 people died in the police firing, which made it one of the saddest days in India's history. And since then, the language issue and language agitation has not been resolved in India. The one compromise formula, especially in terms of educating the children, was thought of in the form of a three language formula. Now, it was in 1960s that the Kothari Commission, that was tasked at making India's education policy, gave this idea of a three language formula. Three language formula means that the kids in the schools should be taught in three languages: Hindi, English, which are the official languages, and one other regional language in all the Hindi speaking states. For example, let's say in UP, the kids should be taught Hindi, English, and some other third language. It can be Bengali, it can be Kannada, it can be Tamil, etc. However, the reality is that in most of the Hindi states, it did not happen. And the same was then reciprocated in the non-Hindi states as well. The one state that has been at the forefront of fighting against this Hindi imposition is Tamil Nadu. They have always been opposed to a three language formula, and in the schools of Tamil Nadu, you usually only have education in Tamil and in the English language. Now, you might have heard a lot and you will hear a lot about the three language formula in the coming days as well. It was in fact a part of the new national education policy as well, which said that the three language formula would continue. Now, three language formula simply means Hindi, English, and a regional language of their respective states. In case of Hindi speaking state, that can be some other regional language. It was first a part of the National Policy of Education of 1968, also called the Kothari Commission. One of the reasons why they suggested it was to bridge the language gap and to ensure a better unity and understanding of each other's culture and understanding. Now, I'll give you a very simple example of a similar kind of a scheme that Government of India runs even today. That is a scheme called Ek Bharat Shresht Bharat. This is again a scheme where the union government pairs a couple of states to have cultural exchanges, to run programs in each other's languages, etc., to bring the country closer and to understand each other's heritage. This was a similar kind of a thing that was being done through this three language formula. However, as I said, the implementation of the formula has not been great either in the Hindi speaking belt or in the non-Hindi speaking belt in Tamil Nadu, Puducherry, Tripura, etc. These were the articles we wanted to discuss from the Hindu newspaper today. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number one, what is the three language formula? How far has it been successful in achieving its original objectives? Second, define quasi-federalism with respect to India's politics. How is India's federalism different from the one followed in the USA? Both the questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video.